The rain hammered the tin roof like 1,000 unanswered questions, each drop a reminder that some storms never truly pass. I stood frozen in the doorway of my cramped shotgun house on Elm Street in Millwood, Georgia, the kind of forgotten southern town where the magnolias bloomed defiant against the rusting factories, and stared at the woman who had once been my undoing. Juliet Hale, soaked to the bone, her dark hair plastered like a crown of thorns, whispered my name as if it were a prayer she had rehearsed in the dark. "Peyton, I need you to let me in just this once." That voice, velvet-edged with desperation, cracked something deep inside me, a fracture I had spent 8 years sealing with the mortar of routine and regret. Millwood had always been a place of sharp divides, the railroad tracks splitting the haves from the have-nots, the old money clinging to their antebellum facades while folks like me scraped by in the shadow of the shuttered textile mills. I was Peyton Reeves, daughter of a line of mill workers whose hands bore the calluses of generations, now tending bar at the Rusty Anchor and nursing a community college degree that felt more like a consolation prize than a key to anywhere better. Juliet, on the other hand, had been born into the Hale legacy, the family that owned half the land this side of the Chattahoochee, their name etched on the library steps and the bank that foreclosed on dreams like mine. We had collided first at Emory, two worlds orbiting the same Atlanta campus like mismatched planets. She, the poised sorority queen majoring in art history, gliding through parties in pearls that cost more than my mother's house. Me, the scholarship kid from the sticks, clawing through literature classes with a fire in my belly that scared even me. Rivals, they called us, debating Faulkner in seminar until the room crackled, our words weapons sharpened on personal edges. But beneath the barbs, there had been glances that lingered too long, touches accidental yet electric, a current neither of us dared name in the Bible Belt's unyielding glare. Now, here she was on my sagging porch, the woman I had buried in the recesses of my mind like a letter never sent. The air between us hummed with the ghosts of what might have been, heavy as the humidity that clung to everything in July. I stepped aside, not out of mercy, but because denying her felt like denying the part of myself I had starved into silence. She slipped inside, dripping onto the faded linoleum, her eyes scanning the room as if mapping the ruins of my life. The space was sparse, a threadbare couch from the thrift store, books stacked like fortifications against loneliness, a single framed photo of Mama on the mantel, her smile frozen in the summer before the cancer took her. "I drove all night," Juliet said, her voice barely above the storm's murmur. She peeled off her sodden jacket, revealing a simple white blouse that clung like a second skin, but I forced my gaze to her face, to the hollows beneath her eyes that spoke of battles fought in ballrooms and boardrooms, not back alleys. From Charleston. I just couldn't stay there anymore. Charleston. The word landed like a slap, evoking the Grand Hale estate on the Battery, where she had returned after graduation to play the dutiful daughter, the perfect match for whatever blue-blood suitor her father paraded before her. I had heard the whispers through the grapevine, mutual acquaintances from Emory who friend me on social media out of pity, posting photos of Juliet at galas, her arm linked with some trust fund lawyer named Ellis or Everett, men with jaws like marble and smiles that never reached their eyes. I had unfollowed them all, but the ache lingered, a dull throb like the phantom pain of a limb long gone. "Sit," I said, gesturing to the couch, my tone clipped as I busied myself in the kitchenette, brewing coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The pot gurgled like an old confession, filling the air with its bitter promise. When I returned with 2 mugs, she was curled into the cushions, knees drawn up, looking smaller than I remembered. Not fragile, Juliet Hale had never been fragile, but worn like a heirloom quilt frayed at the edges from too many hands claiming ownership. "Why now?" I asked, handing her the mug, our fingers brushing in that inevitable way that sent a jolt through me, unbidden and unwelcome. I settled into the armchair across from her, the distance a flimsy barrier against the pull. "After all this time, you have a life, Juliet. A good one. Why come knocking on my door like some prodigal ghost?" She sipped the coffee, wincing at the heat, then set it down with deliberate care. Her eyes met mine, green as the kudzu that choked the abandoned lots downtown, and in them I saw the storm's full fury, not the rain outside but the one she carried within. "Because it's not mine," she whispered. "None of it. The engagement party last month. Ellis proposed in front of everyone, with Daddy's blessing and Mama's diamonds. And I said yes, Peyton. I said yes because that's what Hales do. We preserve the name, the legacy, the lie." The word lie hung between us, sharp as a switchblade. I remembered the last time we had truly spoken, that humid Atlanta night after our final debate, when the campus quad was alive with fireflies and the distant thrum of frat house bass. We had wandered to the edge of the arboretum, away from prying eyes, and there, under the sprawling oaks, she had kissed me. Not tentative, not experimental. A kiss that tasted of rebellion and revelation, her hands framing my face as if I were the only map worth following. It lasted seconds, maybe minutes, time blurring in the heat of it, but it shattered everything. The next morning she had pulled away, citing family expectations, the weight of her father's senatorial ambitions, the whispers that would follow a Hale daughter who dared to love outside the lines. I had let her go because what choice did I have? I was the mill townsgirl, the one who fixed cars with my uncle on weekends and dreamed of stories that could transport me beyond the horizon. Loving her would have been like trying to hold lightning, beautiful but destined to burn. So I graduated, returned to Millwood, buried myself in shifts at the bar and the quiet rhythm of small-town survival. Dates with men who were kind but forgettable. A fleeting affair with a woman from the next county over that ended in mutual relief. But Juliet. She had become the what-if stitched into the seams of my solitude. Now she leaned forward, elbows on knees, her voice gaining an edge that cut through the rain's relentless drone. I thought I could do it. Play the part. Marry Ellis, give Daddy the grandchildren he parades in his campaign ads. But every time I look at him I see you. That night in the Arboretum, the way you recited those lines from Morrison like they were scripture, your eyes lighting up as if the world could be remade in words. You saw me, Peyton. Not the Hale heiress but Juliet. The girl who sketches forgotten gravestones and weeps at the injustice of it all. Her confession uncoiled in the dim light, each word a thread pulling at the careful knots I had tied around my heart. I wanted to rage, to demand why she had chosen silence over solidarity, why she had let the world dictate her desires. But anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. It would only leave me emptier. Instead, I reached across the space between us, my hand hovering near hers, close enough to feel the warmth radiating like a forbidden flame. "And what now?" I asked softly, the question a bridge or a breakwater depending on her answer. "You show up here unannounced in the middle of a deluge expecting what? Absolution? A rewrite?" She captured my hand then, her grip firm, fingers interlacing with mine as if we had never parted. The contact was a spark to dried tinder, igniting memories I had doused with whiskey and work. "I don't know," she admitted, her thumb tracing circles on my skin, a gesture so intimate it stole my breath. "But I couldn't breathe there, Peyton. The air in that house. It's poison with expectations. Ellis is a good man, but he's not. He doesn't set my soul on fire. You did. You do." The rain eased to a patter, the world outside softening as if granting us this fragile interlude. I pulled her closer, not thinking, only feeling, the salt of her tears mingling with the coffee's bitterness as our lips met in a kiss that was equal parts homecoming and heresy. It was tentative at first, a question posed in the language of touch, then deepening into the desperate affirmation we had both denied for too long. Her hands in my hair, mine on the curve of her back. We moved as one, shedding layers of pretense and pain until the couch became our confessional, the storm our only witness. Dawn crept in gray and grudging, painting the room in hues of regret and resolve. Juliet stirred beside me, her head on my chest, the steady rise and fall of her breathing a rhythm I could lose myself in forever. But forever was a word Millwood didn't know. It was a town of endings, where secrets festered like untreated wounds and scandals bloomed faster than the azaleas. As she slept, I traced the line of her jaw, committing her to memory once more, knowing that this refuge I offered was built on borrowed time. We spent the morning in hushed domesticity. Eggs scrambled with whatever was in the fridge, coffee refills laced with tentative laughter. She told me of the engagement ring hidden in her glove compartment, a 2-carat solitaire that felt like a shackle rather than a symbol. I shared stories of Millwood's underbelly, the bar fights over lost jobs, the church ladies who eyed me with suspicion after Mama's funeral, whispering about my unladylike ways. We were two women bridging chasms, of class, of convention, of the hearts we had armored against the world. By afternoon the sun broke through, steam rising from the puddles like spirits fleeing the light. Juliet stood at the window, gazing at the street where pickup trucks rumbled past, their drivers tipping hats to no one in particular. "I called off the wedding," she said suddenly, turning to me with eyes fierce as Spanish moss in a gale. Last night before I left. Left a voicemail for Ellis for Daddy. Told them I couldn't live that lie anymore. The weight of her words settled over us, heavy as the humidity returning with the heat. Pride swelled in my chest, mingled with the terror I couldn't name. In Millwood, coming out wasn't a declaration. It was an eviction notice from the only community you knew. I had learned that the hard way after a brief romance with Lena, the librarian who had since fled to Atlanta, leaving behind rumors that still clung to me like burrs. "What will you do?" I asked, joining her at the window, our shoulders brushing in silent solidarity. She turned, cupping my face, her touch a vow unspoken. "Stay. Here with you. If you'll have me, we can figure it out together." It sounded like a fairy tale scripted for a different zip code, but in her eyes I saw the truth of it. The rival who had become my refuge, knocking not to conquer, but to claim the life we had both deferred. As the day waned, we walked the cracked sidewalks of Elm Street, hand in hand under the guise of friendship, the town's watchful eyes be damned. Whispers would follow, judgments sharp as switchgrass, but for the first time, the future felt less like a sentence and more like a sentence I could write myself. Yet even as hope flickered, a shadow loomed. The Hale machine, oiled by old money and older prejudices, would not yield easily. Juliet's phone buzzed incessantly on the coffee table, notifications from numbers I didn't recognize, each one a reminder that the past wasn't buried. It was merely waiting for the right moment to exhume itself. The first fracture came not from the town, but from within the fragile sanctuary we had built. 2 weeks after Juliet's arrival, she slipped into the rhythm of Millwood like a secret melody, helping me sling beers at the Rusty Anchor on slow Tuesdays, her laughter cutting through the haze of cigarette smoke and stale regrets. The regulars, grizzled men with stories etched in their wrinkles, eyed her with a mix of awe and suspicion, the Hale girl slumming it in their world. But she charmed them with tales of Charleston's hidden alleys and sketches of their weathered faces on napkins, turning skeptics into reluctant allies. Nights were ours alone, tangled in sheets that smelled of lavender soap and possibility. We whispered futures into the darkness. A small gallery for her art in the Mill District, me finishing that novel gathering dust on my nightstand. Her touch was a revelation, mapping territories of desire I had only glimpsed in stolen moments. No grand gestures, just the quiet poetry of bodies speaking what words often fumbled, her fingers tracing verses on my skin, my breath a cadence against her neck. But the Hales were not ones to fade quietly. The first call came on a sweltering Thursday, as thunderheads gathered over the peach orchards. Juliet's phone lit up with her father's name, Harlan Hale, the man whose senatorial smile masked a spine of wrought iron. She let it ring, but the voicemail pierced the air later, his voice a low drawl laced with paternal thunder. "Juliet, this foolishness ends now. Come home. We've indulged your rebellion long enough. The family's reputation isn't a plaything." She deleted it without reply, but the color drained from her face, leaving her pale as the ghosts that haunted the old Hale plantation. I pulled her close, murmuring assurances into her hair, but doubt had seated itself, a kudzu vine insidious and unrelenting. That night, as we lay awake to the storm's symphony, she confessed fragments of her upbringing, the cotillions where she learned to curtsy before she could question, the whispered scandals of Great Aunt Eliza who had vanished to Europe in the 50s, rumored to have loved a woman and paid for it with exile. "You're not her," I said, my voice steady as the oak outside my window. "You're here. With me. That's the choice that matters." She nodded, but her eyes held the distance of someone scanning for escape routes. The next day, Ellis arrived unannounced, his sleek black SUV an affront to the gravel drive, kicking up dust like an accusation. He stepped out in khakis pressed to perfection, loafers polished against the red clay, his face a mask of wounded entitlement. Juliet and I were on the porch sipping sweet tea when he approached, extending a hand I ignored. "Peyton, is it?" His tone was cordial, but his eyes raked over me like I was an exhibit in a curiosity shop. "I've heard stories." The word hung, loaded with the subtext of small-town telegraph. The barmaid with a past, the one who never quite fit the mold. Juliet rose, her posture regal despite the faded sundress, placing herself between us like a shield. "Ellis, what are you doing here?" He ignored her, addressing me directly, his voice dropping to that conspiratorial timbre men like him wielded like weapons. "Look, I get it. This phase. The dramatic exit, the midnight drive. But Juliet's not thinking straight. Her family's worried. Harlan's got pulled donations to campaigns, favors in high places. You don't want to make this harder than it has to be. The implication slithered through the air. Leave or be made to. I felt the old fire rise, the one that had fueled my debates with Juliet at Emory. But I swallowed it, meeting his gaze with the calm of someone who had stared down worse than a jilted suitor. Harder for who exactly? Seems like y'all have been scripting her life long enough without my input. Ellis's smile tightened, a crack in the facade. He turned to Juliet, his plea laced with the desperation of a man losing his prize. Darlin', this isn't you. Millwood. It's a dead end. Come back to Charleston. We can fix this, therapy if that's what it takes. But don't throw away everything for this. This, Juliet echoed, her voice steel wrapped in silk, is the first honest breath I've taken in years. She stepped closer to me, her hand finding mine, the gesture public and unapologetic. Ellis's eyes flicked to our joined fingers, disgust flickering like a bad bulb before he schooled it back to sympathy. You're making a mistake, he said, retreating to his SUV, but the parting shot lingered as he drove off. Harlan won't let this stand. You know that. He was right, of course. The Hales didn't lose, they absorbed, assimilated, erased. That evening, as Juliet and I walked the riverbank where willows wept into the murky Chattahoochee, she unburdened more. The pressure of being the good daughter. The one to redeem the family's tarnished edges after her brother's DUI scandal. Loving me wasn't just a personal risk, it was a threat to the dynasty. A crack in the porcelain facade they polished for voters and donors. We paused at the old swing bridge, its cables rusted but holding much like us. The water below churned with secrets, loggers' tales of lost loves, whispers of escapes under moonless skies. I chose you, she said, leaning into me, the sunset gilding her profile in gold. But part of me wonders if I'm stealing your peace, dragging you into my mess. I turned her to face me, the river's murmur underscoring my words. My peace was a cage, Juliet. Lined with routine, sure, but bars all the same. You didn't drag me, you freed us both. Our kiss there, with the bridge swaying gently beneath us, was a pact sealed against the gathering dusk. But as we returned home, the first tendrils of backlash unfurled. A terse email from the bar's owner, citing community concerns about my personal affairs affecting business. Whispers at the grocery, sidelong glances from women who had once shared recipes after church. Millwood wasn't Atlanta, it didn't bend. It broke what didn't conform. Juliet noticed, of course, her artist's eye attuned to the subtle shifts. That night, over a dinner of cornbread and collards from my aunt's garden, she proposed a plan. Apply for grants to revive the old community theater, turn it into a space for stories like ours, unspoken, unashamed. Art as resistance, she called it, her enthusiasm a bomb. I agreed, sketching outlines on scrap paper, our dreams intertwining like the rivers that fed the land. Yet sleep brought no ease. In the witching hour, Juliet bolted upright, gasping from a nightmare, visions of her father's rage, of being locked in the Charleston attic like some gothic heroine. I held her as she trembled, rocking her like a child, but the fear had taken root. The next morning, a package arrived, unmarked but unmistakable. A leather-bound family Bible, its pages dog-eared at Leviticus, accompanied by a note in Harlan's precise script. Return before you damn us all. Juliet burned it in the backyard fire pit, flames devouring the gilt edges, but the ash settled heavy on our souls. We drove to the county line that afternoon, seeking solace in the anonymity of a roadside diner in neighboring Alabama, where no one knew our names. Over pecan pie and black coffee, she traced my palm, reading futures in the lines. What if we leave? She murmured. Start over in Vermont, somewhere the leaves turn without judgment. The idea tantalized, a horizon beyond the haze, but Millwood was in my bones, the red clay under my nails, the voices of ancestors echoing in the wind. Leaving felt like betrayal, not just of place but of the fight to claim it on our terms. Not yet, I said. We face this here. Together. As we headed back, the radio crackled with a news snippet. Harlan Hale announcing his re-election bid, touting family values in a voice that dripped hypocrisy. Juliet switched it off, but the echo lingered, a harbinger of the battles ahead. That night, as we made love with the urgency born of defiance, I wondered how long Refuge could hold against the tide of tradition. The cracks widened subtly at first, like hairlines in fine china, until the shatter came inevitable and complete. Autumn arrived in Millwood like a reluctant guest, painting the dogwoods in crimson and gold, but the chill it brought seeped deeper than the dropping mercury. Juliet and I threw ourselves into the theater project, securing a crumbling venue on the town's frayed edge. The old Lyric, shuttered since the 80s when Vix killed the marquee dreams. We scrubbed floors until our hands blistered, hung lights that flickered like hesitant stars, and drafted a season of plays that whispered of hidden lives. Tennessee Williams reimagined with queer undercurrents, local voices sharing monologues of coming out in cotton fields. The community response was a patchwork quilt of support and scorn. My Aunt Etta, with her biscuit-calloused hands and unyielding Baptist faith, showed up one Saturday with paint rollers and a tentative truce. "I don't understand it all, child, but if it keeps that light in your eyes." Others crossed the street, their prayers laced with pity. Juliet's sketches adorned the walls, ethereal figures emerging from shadows, symbols of emergence that drew curious crowds to our open houses. Intimacy deepened in those months, a slow burn that forged us anew. Mornings found us tangled in sunlight filtering through lace curtains, her head on my shoulder as we planned over oatmeal and the local paper's slim arts section. She taught me to see the poetry in decay, the way rust on the Lyric's tin roof mimicked abstract expressionism, and I showed her the resilience of roots, foraging blackberries along the river where my grandfather had fished. Our love was no longer the frantic spark of reunion, but a steady hearth, warming the spaces fear had chilled. Yet Harlan's shadow lengthened. Letters arrived, formal missives from family lawyers citing emotional distress, and veiled threats of disinheritance. Juliet forwarded them unread, but each envelope eroded her resolve, a drip-carving stone. Ellis, too, persisted. Flowers delivered to the bar with notes pleading for one last talk. His persistence a mix of genuine hurt and possessive gall. I intercepted one bouquet, crushing petals underfoot in the alley, the scent clinging like accusation. The breaking point brewed at the county fair, Millwood's annual ritual of fried dough and fiddle music under harvest moons. We attended arm in arm, a quiet declaration amid the Ferris wheel's whirl, and the scent of caramel corn. Laughter bubbled as we shared cotton candy, pink sugar dissolving on our tongues like fleeting joys. But eyes followed, churchgoers murmuring behind programs, a gaggle of high school girls giggling then falling silent. Juliet tensed, her grip tightening, but we pressed on, claiming the midway as our own. It was Harlan who shattered the evening. He materialized from the crowd like a specter in seersucker, flanked by 2 aides and a photographer for the local rag. His face was a study in controlled fury, jowls quivering under the string lights. "Juliet," he boomed, voice carrying over the Calliope's tune, drawing heads like moths to flame. "Enough of this charade." She froze, the stuffed bear we had won at rings toss clutched like a talisman. I stepped forward, but she placed a hand on my arm, her whisper fierce. "Let me." Facing him, she straightened, chin lifted in the defiance I had first glimpsed in debate halls. "Father, this isn't a charade. It's my life." His laugh was bark without mirth, eyes sliding to me with the disdain of a man appraising chattel. "Your life? Child, you've mistaken whimsy for destiny. Peyton here, she's a distraction, a phase fueled by that godless college. Come home. We'll get you help. A fresh start with Ellis, who understands duty." The crowd thickened, a semicircle of voyeurs feigning concern. Whispers rippled. "Poor Harlan. Leading her astray." I felt the old rage coil, but Juliet's voice cut through, steady as gospel. "Duty? You've built your empire on it. Father, marriages of convenience, votes bought with piety. But I won't be your prop. I love Peyton. That's the truth you've always feared." Gasps punctuated the air, the photographer's flash blinding as Harlan's composure cracked. "Love." He spat the word like bile. "This abomination will ruin us. The campaign, the name, everything I've bled for. If you choose this, you're no daughter of mine." The ultimatum landed like a gut punch, Juliet paling, but her eyes blazed. "Then I'm no Hale. I'm free." He stormed off, aides trailing, the crowd dispersing with awkward coughs and averted gazes. We fled to the truck, Juliet trembling in the passenger seat as I navigated the fairgrounds exodus. Rain began again, a biblical downpour that matched the torrent inside her. "He meant it," she sobbed, fists clenched. "Disowned." Everything, the trust, the house gone. I pulled over at the river's bend, drawing her into my arms across the console. Money buys houses, Juliet, not homes. We have this theater, us. It's enough. But as we drove home, the weight pressed heavier. The next days blurred in a haze of fallout. Headlines in the Millwood Gazette. Hale heiress sparks scandal at fair. And voicemails from Charleston kin decrying her selfish folly. Juliet withdrew, sketching furiously in the dim light, her lines jagged with unspoken grief. I found her one dawn on the porch, staring at the horizon where the mill's skeleton loomed. I betrayed them, she murmured, not looking at me. All those years of promises, and I shattered it for. What if it's not enough? What if I drag you down too? Her doubt was a mirror to my own buried fears. The class chasm that had always yawned between us, now widened by her fall from grace. I knelt before her, taking her hands. You didn't betray. You chose truth. And if it's not enough, we build more. Together. She searched my face, then pulled me up, our kiss salt-tinged with tears, a reaffirmation amid the wreckage. We rallied, channeling pain into the theater's opening night. A staged reading of local stories, including Juliet's monologue on loving against the grain. The house sold out, faces familiar and new filling the seats. Etta in the front row nodding through misty eyes, even a few fair holdouts, curiosity overriding creed. Applause thundered as the curtain fell, but backstage, Juliet collapsed against me, whispering, "We did it." Joy was short-lived. As we locked up, a shadow detached from the alley, Ellis disheveled, eyes wild with a mix of sorrow and spite. "You're destroying her," he hissed at me, voice slurred with bourbon. "Harlan's pulling strings, code violations on this dump. Whispers to your boss. Leave her, Peyton. Or watch it all crumble." He lunged, more plea than punch, but I shoved him back, heart pounding. Juliet intervened, her voice ice. "Go, Ellis. Find your own way." He retreated, muttering curses, but his words festered. The theater's permit was revoked the next week, citing structural hazards that smelled of bought inspectors. The bar cut my hours, budget constraints the excuse. Isolation crept in, Millwood's walls closing like a vice. Juliet and I clung tighter, nights a fortress of touch and talk, but the strain showed, arguments over small things, silences heavy with what-ifs. One evening after a fruitless grant meeting in Atlanta, she snapped, hurling a sketchbook across the room. "This is my fault. I came here thinking refuge, but I'm poison." "No," I countered, retrieving the pages, one fluttering open to a drawing of us on the bridge, tender and true. "We're the antidote to all of it." She softened, pulling me close, but the seed of fracture had sprouted. Days later I came home to find her packing. A single bag, her face resolute yet ravaged. "I'm going to Charleston," she said, voice breaking. "Not back to them. To negotiate. Sell what I can, cut ties clean. Then we go Vermont, Oregon, anywhere but here." Relief warred with dread. Her absence a void I already felt. "Promise?" I asked, holding her as if to imprint her scent. "Promise." Our goodbye was a storm of passion and parting, bodies memorizing what time would steal. She was gone 3 days, the house echoing with her absence. Calls came sparse. "Daddy's raging, but the lawyers are drawing papers." Then silence. On the 4th, a knock, not hers but a courier with documents. A settlement offer, generous but gagging, requiring her to cease public association with Ms. Reeves, for the family's reputation. I burned it, but doubt gnawed. When she returned it was changed, eyes distant, a new necklace glinting, Mama Hale's heirloom. "It's over," she said, voice flat. "The money's in escrow. We can leave." But as she spoke, Ellis's car idled outside, headlights cutting the dusk. Betrayal dawned slow, then shattered. She had signed not the gag but a reconciliation. "He convinced me," she whispered, tears carving paths. "Said it was temporary to buy peace. But I faltered, Peyton. The weight." The room spun, the refuge crumbling to rubble. "You knocked on my door," I choked. "And now you lock it behind you?" She reached, but I recoiled, the past's grave unearthed, its dirt bitter on my tongue. The rival had returned, not as refuge, but as the ghost that buried me anew. The door clicked shut behind Juliet like the final punctuation on a sentence neither of us had authored, leaving me in a silence that roared louder than any storm. I sank to the floor, the linoleum cold against my palms, the air thick with the ghost of her perfume, jasmine and regret. Outside, Ellis's engine faded into the night, carrying her away to the life she had half chosen, half endured. Betrayal wasn't a thunderclap. It was this quiet unraveling, threads of trust pulled until the fabric gave way. Millwood blurred in the days that followed, a watercolor smear of routine and restraint. I poured drinks at the Anchor with mechanical precision, smiling through the burn of whiskey I no longer tasted. Aunt Etta stopped by, her worry wrapped in a casserole dish, but words failed her. She squeezed my hand and left, the doors chime a mocking echo. The theater stood dark, its posters curling at the edges like discarded dreams, a reminder of the world we had dared to build. Nights were the worst, the bed vast and vacant, sheets still faintly scented with her. I traced the empty space beside me, replaying the fracture. Her eyes pleading yet resolute, whispering temporary, as if it could bandage the wound. Temporary. The word mocked me, a politician's promise, as hollow as Harlan's campaign vows. I had known love like this before. Fierce, forbidden, fleeting. But with Juliet, it had felt like destiny rewritten. Now it was just another scar, etched deeper for the hope that preceded it. A week in, the whispers turned to confrontation. At the bar, a regular, old Mr. Thibodeau, with his veteran's limp and unfiltered opinions, leaned in over his pint. Heard the Hale girl's gone back where she belongs. Smart move, Peyton. Folks like us don't mix with their kind. You'll find a nice fella yet. His pat on the shoulder was meant kind, but it landed like condescension, the town's paternalism a cage disguised as care. I nodded, biting back the retort that burned my tongue. Nice fellas don't measure worth in bank accounts or bloodlines. Instead, I busied myself polishing glasses, the rhythm a mantra against the ache. But solitude bred clarity, unwelcome as it was. In the quiet hours, I unearthed the novel from its drawer, fingers flying over keys in a frenzy of catharsis. Words poured out, not of loss but of reclamation. A protagonist much like me, navigating the South's serpentine paths, loving fiercely against the grain. It wasn't Juliet's story. It was mine finally claimed. The turning came unbidden. On a crisp October morning when the leaves crunched underfoot like brittle apologies. I drove to the river, the Chattahoochee low and languid, reflecting a sky bruised with clouds. Standing on the swing bridge, wind whipping my hair, I screamed into the void, raw, primal, releasing the grief I had swallowed whole. The water carried it away, indifferent witness to my unraveling, and in its wake came a fragile peace. Not healing, not yet, but the space for it. Back home, a letter waited, postmarked Charleston. Juliet's script elegant as ever. I hesitated, envelope trembling in my grip, then tore it open. Pages spilled apologies. I faltered because I feared the void you filled so completely. Ellis offered a script I knew, but it's ash in my mouth. Forgive me? No, fight me. Be the rival who challenges me to better. Enclosed was a check, severance from the Hales, enough to resurrect the theater alone if I chose. Rage flared, then faded to resolve. I didn't cash it. I framed the letter, a talisman of what we had been. The theater reopened under my name alone. A guerrilla season of one-woman shows. Mine raw recitations of the novel's chapters, drawing crowds from Atlanta's fringes, women who nodded in silent kinship. Etta attended the premiere, her presence a quiet victory, and afterward, over pie at her kitchen table, she said, "Your mama would be proud. She always said you had stories in you bigger than this town." Word reached Juliet, of course, through the grapevine or her own quiet inquiries. She appeared at the third performance, slipping into the back row like a shadow, her face gaunt but eyes alight. The house lights rose, applause crashing, and our gazes locked across the dimming stage. No words, just a nod, acknowledgement, not absolution. Afterward, in the alley behind the Lyric, amid the dumpster's faint rot and the night's chill bite, she waited. "Peyton," she breathed, stepping close, the space between us charged as that first rainy night. I ended it. With Ellis, with them. Sold the shares, cut the cords. I'm adrift but free. I studied her, searching for the lie, but found only the raw edges of reinvention. And what now? My voice was steady, the rival's edge honed sharper by solitude. She smiled, tentative, a bloom after frost. "Now I earn it. Your trust, your time. No grand gestures, just showing up. For the theater. For you. If you'll let me sweep the stage, fetch the props. Start at the bottom. Laughter escaped me, surprising and sharp, cutting the tension like a well-timed line. The bottom? Juliet Hale mopping floors? Now that's a plot twist. We walked then through Millwood's sleeping streets, not touching but parallel, the distance a choice rather than a chasm. She spoke of Charleston's suffocation, the hollow echoes of galas where toasts rang false. I shared the novel's progress, chapters born of our fracture, turning pain to prose. By dawn at my door, our door. She paused, vulnerability bared. I don't deserve refuge yet. But may I? Knock again. The question hung, a bridge rebuilt plank by plank. I opened the door wide, stepping aside. Come in. But this time we write the rules. She entered, and with her the past stirred. Not as grave but as foundation. We didn't rush to the bedroom. Instead, coffee brewed, stories swapped over the table, the morning unfolding like a scene from the life we might yet script. Days turned to weeks, Juliet proving her words and deeds, painting sets at dawn, charming donors with her unfeigned passion, even facing Harlan when he appeared at the theater's fundraiser, his bluster met with her calm. I'm building something real, father. Join or step aside. He stepped aside, grudgingly, the first concession from a man unaccustomed to defeat. Millwood shifted subtly, whispers softening to debates, the bar's hours restored, a pride flag fluttering discreetly at the anchor. Our love rekindled slowly, embers fanned to flame. A hand on the small of her back during rehearsals, kisses stolen in the wings, nights where touch was exploration renewed. Winter blanketed the town in rare snow, transforming the mills to ethereal ruins. On Christmas Eve, under strings of lights in the lyrics lobby, Juliet knelt, not in proposal but presentation. A sketchbook bound in leather, pages filled with our story, illustrated in her hand. From rival to refuge, she read from the dedication, voice thick. And beyond, to whatever we dare. Tears pricked, but I pulled her up, our embrace a vow amid the hush. Beyond, I echoed, the word a horizon vast and welcoming. Yet freedom's price lingered, a subtle tax on the soul. Harlan's campaign faltered, scandals unearthed not by us, but by his own machinations, a lover on the side, hypocrisies exposed. He called Juliet once, voice broken. Help me salvage this. She declined gently. Salvage yourself first. In the new year, as resolutions bloomed, we planned. Expand the theater to touring shows, voices from the South's hidden margins. My novel found an agent in Atlanta, its pages a testament to endurance. Juliet and I, no longer divided by class or convention, stood as equals, rivals in the best sense, challenging each other to greater depths. One spring evening, as dogwoods shed petals like confetti, we drove to the bridge, the river singing its eternal song. There, under the same willows that had witnessed our first kiss years ago, she took my hand. Marry me. Not in grandeur, but in the quiet poetry of us. Yes, I said, the word a liberation. The past, once buried, now lived, not as haunt, but as the rich soil from which we grew. Summer returned to Millwood with a vengeance, the air thick as molasses, humidity wrapping around us like an insistent lover. The theater thrived, its marquee aglow with sold-out runs, drawing pilgrims from Savannah to Chattanooga, women and allies seeking stories that mirrored their own quiet rebellions. Juliet and I moved through it like choreographed dancers, her directing with a vision that turned raw scripts to revelation, me performing with a fire tempered by forgiveness. Our engagement was no secret. A simple band of river-worn quartz on my finger, matched on hers, sparked conversations rather than condemnations. Life wove us tighter, threads of domesticity blending with the dramatic. Mornings began with coffee on the porch, watching the town stir. Trucks rumbling to the revived lumber yard. Children biking past with carefree abandon. Evenings ended in the garden we tilled behind the house, hands dirty with possibility, planting heirlooms that echoed our roots. Intimacy was the undercurrent, a language refined. Her fingers weaving through mine during intermissions, my head on her lap as she read aloud from my manuscript, voices overlapping in harmonious critique. But peace, in places like Millwood, was ever provisional, a truce tested by tempests. Harlan's downfall accelerated that June, federal probes into campaign finance, whispers of embezzlement from family trusts. The Gazette splashed it across front pages. Hale legacy crumbles. Juliet followed the coverage with detached sorrow, clipping articles not for schadenfreude, but as chapters closing. He built walls to protect us, she mused one night, folding the paper by lamplight. But they imprisoned him most of all. I nodded, tracing the lines of tension that lingered on her brow. And now? Free to build bridges instead. Her smile was soft but shadowed. The prodigal's return had carved channels of doubt, making her question every foundation. Ellis, too, resurfaced, not as antagonist, but as a ghost seeking exorcism. He appeared at a theater matinee, sober and subdued, requesting a word with Juliet in the lobby. I watched from the wings, heart clenched as they spoke in low tones. She emerged pale but composed, later confiding. He apologized. Said he saw the light in what we had, but knew it paled next to yours. Offered to testify against Daddy, clear the air. Forgiveness was her gift, one I was still learning. I pulled her close, murmuring, "You're the light, Juliet. Don't let their shadows dim it." The real storm brewed from within the community, a backlash disguised as concern. Petitions circulated, "Preserve Millwood's values," spearheaded by the First Baptist deacon, citing our agenda as moral erosion. Theaters were for entertainment, not indoctrination, they claimed, signatures mounting from fearful flocks. Funding dried to a trickle, donors withdrawing under pressure, the lyrics' lights dimming as bills mounted. We fought back not with fury but finesse. Town halls in the park, open dialogues where skeptics aired grievances and we shared truths, not sermons but stories. Etta spoke, her voice quavering but firm. "My niece found her way, and it's brighter for it. Judge not, lest ye be judged. Ain't that the good book?" Faces softened, a few hands raised in support. The petition faltered, but the scars it left were subtle. Empty seats on quieter nights, glances that lingered too long. Through it our bond fortified, a bulwark against the barrage. We escaped when we could, weekend drives to the Smokies, where mist-shrouded peaks offered perspective. There, on a trail overlooking valleys carved by ancient waters, Juliet proposed our vows, not traditional but tailored. "I promise to challenge you to cherish the rival in your spirit, to build refuges from ruins." I echoed, adding, "And to hold the door open always, for the woman who knocked and changed everything." Wedding plans unfolded organically, a ceremony at the Lyric under harvest lights, guests a tapestry of allies, Etta theater folk from afar, even a contrite Harlan, who arrived uninvited but stayed silent in the back, his presence a grudging nod to evolution. Vows exchanged, rings slipped on with trembling hands, the kiss sealing not just us, but the mending of fractures long ignored. Honeymoon was local lore. A cabin in the North Georgia woods, days lost to hiking and stargazing, nights to the symphony of crickets and sighs. Returning, we dove deeper into advocacy. Workshops for youth on the spectrum of love, partnerships with Atlanta's queer arts collectives. My novel published to modest acclaim, its dedication simple. To the knock that resurrected me. Yet humanity's arc bends slow, and setbacks shadowed our stride. A fire arson, investigators whispered. Gutted the Lyrics prop storage one autumn night, smoke curling like accusations into the sky. We stood amid the embers, arms linked, watching firefighters douse the flames. "They fear what we light," Juliet said, voice steady. "But fire clears the way for new growth." Rebuild we did, crowdfunding surging from supporters nationwide, the theater rising phoenix-like with solar panels and inclusive murals. Harlan's trial loomed that winter, headlines chronicling his fall. Guilty on counts of fraud, sentenced to community service in the very towns he had scorned. Juliet visited him in county lockup, emerging with closure if not absolution. "He said he was wrong," she told me later, curled in my lap. "About me. About us. Too late, but it's something." Redemption's ripples touched Ellis, who relocated to Oregon, starting a foundation for LGBTQ youth. Ironic but genuine, his letters to Juliet sparse apologies laced with progress. Millwood evolved incrementally. A pride event in the square, rainbow crosswalks at the intersection, Etta's Bible study group quietly inclusive. Our love, tempered by trials, bloomed profound. Less dramatic blaze, more enduring glow. Children entered the narrative peripherally, fostering a teen runaway, Jamie, whose story echoed ours, teaching her that refuge was earned, not entitled. Mornings with her at the breakfast table, Juliet sketching while I cooked, Jamie's laughter a new melody. Years layered like sediment, the past a foundation, not a fault line. At 40, I looked back from the porch, gray threading my hair, Juliet's hand warm in mine, and saw not burial but rebirth. The knock had unearthed not just pain, but the profound capacity for grace. One evening as fireflies danced like errant stars, she turned to me. "From rival to refuge," she murmured, echoing the title of that long-ago sketchbook. "And now," I smiled, pulling her close, "to home. Always." In that embrace, Millwood's divides blurred, society's strictures softened by the simple act of loving unapologetically. We had knocked down doors, built bridges over chasms, and in doing so illuminated paths for those who followed. The story didn't end. It unfolded page by resilient page, a testament to the human heart's unyielding quest for truth. Decades distilled in Millwood's unhurried cadence, the town a palimpsest of old wounds and new writings. The lyric stood as a beacon, its facade weathered but welcoming, hosting seasons that spanned from Southern Gothic revivals to world premieres of queer odysseys penned by emerging voices. Juliet and I, silvered and settled, moved through it as elder stateswomen, mentors to the next generation, our hands still clasped in quiet conspiracy during curtain calls. Life's later chapters brought layers unforeseen. Jamie, our foster-turned-chosen kin, blossomed into a playwright whose debut explored the intersections of class and desire, dedicating it to the women who opened doors I didn't know existed. We attended her opening night from the front row, tears unashamed, Etta beside us, now great aunt in spirit. Her faith evolved into a gentle radicalism that preached love's boundless forms. Harlan's end came quietly, a heart attack in his diminished Charleston bungalow, the empire reduced to echoes. His obituary lauded public service omitting the shadows. Juliet and I attended the sparse service, not for closure but courtesy, a final nod to the man who had, in his rigidity, catalyzed our freedom. Afterward, over coffee in a waterfront cafe, she reflected. He loved in the only way he knew, fiercely, foolishly. We do better. We did. Our marriage, a quiet revolution, weathered its own gales. Health scares, a bout of Juliet's arthritis flaring like old resentments, my novel's sequel stalled by doubt's creeping fog. But we navigated with the grace of survivors. Therapy sessions in Atlanta blending with riverside walks, words and waters washing clean. Intimacy aged like fine bourbon. Slower sips, deeper warmth, bodies familiar as sacred texts. Millwood transformed under subtle sieges. The Mill District gentrified, coffee shops supplanting smokestacks, young families drawn by our theater's pull. Pride swelled annual, the square alive with floats and fiddles, once hostile faces now waving flags. Yet pockets of prejudice persisted, graffiti on the lyrics wall, a school board skirmish over age-appropriate curricula. We engaged, not exhausted, our voices amplified by alliances forged over years. A pivotal twilight came on our 30th anniversary. The swing bridge festooned with lanterns by Jamie and her cohort, the river murmuring benedictions. We crossed it hand in hand, the sway familiar as breath, pausing midway to exchange tokens, not rings anew but letters, mine chronicling the rival's spark that ignited my prose, hers the refuge found in my unyielding gaze. Reading aloud, voices intertwining, we wept and laughed, the past a constellation guiding rather than grave. Challenges lingered, as they must in tales human and true. A developer's bid threatened the bridge's preservation, citing safety, but we rallied, petitions, protests, a play scripted around its lore. Victory came narrow, the structure spared, symbol intact. In quieter moments, Juliet confessed fears of fading relevance. What if we're relics, Peyton? Stories told but not telling. I cupped her face, tracing lines etched by joy and jihad. Relics? We're roots, the soil from which they grow. Her work evolved: 2 exhibitions in New York, sketches evolving to installations that captured love's quiet insurgencies. Wireframe hearts entangled in kudzu, projections of knocking doors dissolving to open skies. My writing turned memoirish, a trilogy closing with reflections on societal scaffolds and the souls that scale them. Grandchildren entered late. Jamie's adopted twins, wild-haired whirlwinds who called us Nana Pay and Juju, tumbling through the garden in pursuits of fireflies and folktales. We spoiled them with stories, not sweets. Readings from the bridge at dusk, lessons in empathy drawn from our scars. Love ain't always easy, I'd say, Juliet nodding, but it's the hardest thing worth fighting for. As autumns accumulated, health's frailties asserted. Juliet's hands, once deft with charcoal, now ached in the cold. My eyes strained over pages, words blurring like distant horizons. We adapted audiobooks shared in bed, collaborative pieces dictated to Jamie's tech, caregiving reversed gently. I brewed her teas, she massaged my temples, rolls fluid as the river we loved. The ultimate awakening came unannounced, a diagnosis for me, early dementia, the thief that steals memories piecemeal. Fear gripped initial shadows of loss echoing old betrayals, but Juliet met it with ferocity. Research binders, support groups, a vow renewed. I'll remind you every day of us, of the knock. We documented videos of bridge walks, journals of inside jokes, fortifying against the fog. Millwood mourned with us, the community a chorus of casseroles and carpools, the lyric hosting a benefit gala that overflowed with tributes. Etta, frail but fierce, prayed over us. The good Lord don't give what we can't bear, and Woveborn Mountains. In Stolen Lucidity, I revisited the novel's origins, the rainy night of resurrection. Juliet, ever the artist, painted our portrait. Not youthful ideals but aged authenticity. Two women on the porch, hands linked, eyes on the eternal horizon. Hung in the foyer, it whispered to visitors, endurance, not expiration. Winter's grip loosened one dawn. Snow melting to reveal crocuses, defiant harbingers. We sat bundled, watching, her head on my shoulder. From rival to refuge, she murmured, voice athread. To eternity, I replied, the words anchoring amid the drift. When the end neared, it was gentle, a bedside vigil with Jamie's family, songs from the theater's repertoire. Juliet held my hand, her face my last clear vista, whispering, "You knocked on my soul, Peyton. Thank you." Darkness came soft, not as void but veil lifted to light. Juliet carried on, curating my archives, directing a final play from my notes. Refuge reclaimed. At the premiere, she spoke to a full house. She taught me that love defies burial, its resurrection daily. Honor her by living, unbear it. Years later, Juliet joined me, her passing marked by a bridge renamed in our honor. Reeveshale Crossing. Millwood, forever altered, stands as testament. The maw of conformity tamed, not by force but by persistent hearts. In the grand narrative, ours is a verse of valor. Rivals who refused refuge in lies, choosing instead the raw grace of truth. Society's standards, once iron, bend to the will of those who love beyond them. Phoenixes from ashes, knocking doors to dawn. The past lives not as burden but beacon, illuminating that freedom is not given. It's claimed one courageous step at a time.